Hello, everyone. They gave me the honor here to talk about the space industry, my view about it, and where it's really going. As Steffi has mentioned, I'm the managing partner of Global Space Ventures, a venture capital firm really dedicated to investments in the space industry. But there is a whole investment thesis behind what we are starting here with Global Space Ventures, but that is kind of a new phenomenon. And to introduce the whole new space phenomena, I have to take you back about 15 years ago to a conversation that I had with my professor and take it from there, how the story unfolds. About end of 2003, this was after I had just graduated from Munich and was at Stanford, just looking into graduating there as well, I went to my professor and said, hey, I came across this guy, Elon Musk. No one knew about him back then in 2003. And he said he's starting a space company out in LA. He's going to build rockets. And I'm going to go join him. It's a couple of people. He's putting together a tech team, and we're going to do this. My professor's immediate reaction was, you're insane. Space is the business of military, of government, of giant corporations. Some guy somewhere with a few engineers thinking Silicon Valley style, that doesn't exist. And he was right. When you looked out and looked into your opportunities coming out, studying space exploration or space technology, your job was with one of the main usual suspects. And you had all the opportunities in the world to study some amount of technology and be on one of these missions, maybe flying one satellite in your lifetime, maybe 2 every 20 years or so. But then I decided I'm going to give it a shot. And against my professors saying, hey, this guy's going to do it for about a year, lose interest, I decided to go join SpaceX. Well, fast forward a little bit. What happened there? We had an industry that used to launch satellites for $30,000 a kilogram. Huge price tag. And who could afford it? Giant telecom companies, a couple of science payloads, and maybe a few military payloads, and that was it. Over the 10 years that SpaceX got built up, and it got built up to be one of the largest companies in the world, and no one really lost their motivation. If anything, they gained it. We created an industry where that price has come down by tenfold. Today, you can send about a kilogram up to space for about $3,000. We had started that concept in SpaceX for the whole purpose of going to Mars. Building SpaceX along the way was we needed to build the rockets and get things up and going. What we didn't realize is all that would come out of it. Once 3,000 kilograms per $3,000 per kilogram was possible, everyone started thinking about space differently. What they did is saying, hey, up until now, we always used to think, if I'm going to shoot something into space, I'm going to spend so much money. If I'm going to spend so much money, I'm not going to try something new because it could fail, and failure was not an option. Now that it's $3,000, I'm going to start doing some trials. I'm going to send these small little satellites called CubeSats up into space. I'm going to do technology demonstrators. I'm going to try using hardware that hasn't been flown before. I'm going to take it out of cell phones and consumer electronics and try it. Some are going to fail, some are going to succeed, but I can do it now. And that started the whole CubeSat wave. And now you're seeing rockets going up with hundreds of CubeSats on them. And people are proving technology. Now, the second wave is starting. Now that we have actually proven the technology, now that we've proven these designs and seen that satellites can be shrunk, a whole new way of satellites are coming online. All right. And these are these small satellites weighing about 50, 100 kilograms that are all up there, that were all from businesses that we wouldn't think of as space business in the past. They are serving the needs of the industry all around the world. They are satellites that are doing weather forecasting for agriculture. They are following ships, looking for high seas piracy. They are doing aircraft tracking. They are doing drone and autonomous driving support. All of these businesses are now utilizing space. So in that context, now people have proven technology and they're going into this, creating a whole new market. And just as it was said today, this market is one that is more than tripling, more than quadrupling over the next 10 years, serving everyone. There is a really good parallel to this. We used to have internet in the 60s and 70s. Its background was military and government. The idea of DARPANET came out when the US military said, we need to have a network that's resilient. If you take out one node, it can still communicate. But then people realized its commercial value. Now the actual strategic tactical value isn't there, and the internet was born. And that has changed the industry fantastically. Now the same thing is happening to space. Got its start in military, got its start in government, but now our people are realizing the value that is there. And I believe, just like the internet, just like the digital age, space and the use of spatial data is going to set the stage for any industry out there that can utilize its capabilities to be disruptors in their own markets. We're going to see, and we're already seeing, people in the agriculture business, in the insurance business, in the automotive business, acquiring space companies and finding ways to utilize their assets to make the best and the most disruptive products out there. And I think all of that came out of that first dream of we're going to Mars, and then suddenly we created the industry. And I think I'm really looking forward to this panel here to talk about what that industry really will be. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Bulent. Can we have this? Thank you, Bulent. Amazing. So, like Steffi said, Bulent flew in just for this panel. So, really honored to have him here. But we have lots of other interesting people here on this panel. So, next to Bulent is Andy Burkert. Andy Burkert is a professor of astrophysics at the Ludwig Maximilian University of Munich. And he's going to talk a little bit about an exciting project that he did. And Sven, working for an amazing company, Mynaric, that builds satellite communication with lasers. And my good friend Daniel here, he started Munich's first, no, I should say this differently, Munich's second space company. Can we roll the video, please? Okay, so here are a couple of family pictures. I'm a space buff. The reason why I'm a space buff is because my uncle Lutz started the first private space company in the 1970s. So when I grew up, my grandmother, she didn't have pictures of the grandchildren hanging on her walls. She had pictures of rocket launches. And so I grew up with this concept that space is imminent, space exploration is imminent. And it's disappointing. We were there in 1978. Actually, this picture here, it wasn't shot by a rocket of my uncle, it was a slightly larger rocket. It was shot 50 years ago. And this whole thing hasn't really happened. And I always ask myself, why? Where are all the folks who drive space forward? Where are the individuals? So I was really super excited when Steffi asked me to host this panel here on space exploration with some of the most amazing people I can imagine. And we want to start with Daniel. So Daniel, when you see these movies, when you see these pictures of my uncle's rocket launches, what do you feel?
I mostly feel, actually, it's what the saying of this year's DLD conference is. It's mainly optimism and courage, because you have to have the optimism to really build a rocket with private funding already in his 70s, like your uncle did.
Yeah.
He used standard commercially off-the-shelf technology. He used parts from automotive industries just to build his rockets. And then, of course, you have to have the courage to really get the rockets to launch. He had a really big place in Africa. He just where he used to live, and kind of with his entire team really built up a rocket base and just tried to privately build and launch rockets.
Yeah, but where do you get the courage? I mean, come on. You know, this guy started a rocket company. So they're building orbit. I mean, what are you building?
We're building orbital rockets to place satellites into Earth orbit, mainly.
Okay, small satellites, big satellites.
It's actually medium satellites. So we have payload capacities of about 600 to 700 kilograms into low Earth orbits, which makes it the most powerful and biggest privately developed rocket in Europe.
So we couldn't send Elon's car to orbit, but a refrigerator...
At least a small one.
A smaller one, okay,
yeah.
Good. You know, maybe mini, well, they are big these days, but... Yeah, can I show the picture?
Sure.
Really? You're comfortable? Okay. So, I mean, you have to start somewhere, right? You know, this is in front of my office, actually. And, you know, what do you do there?
We were assembling our first prototype, which is obviously not flight hardware or anything else, but really just some hardware to get people some idea of what actually rockets look like and what we do with it, to get them a sense of the size of the rockets.
Okay, so it looks slightly more refined in this picture. Who here has seen the images of the assembly of the Star Hopper in Texas, you know, that SpaceX did very recently? Okay, a few folks. I mean, actually, it doesn't look so much different from what the guys did on my parking lot. So, you know, the next step is something like that. And, you know, what do you need to actually get there?
I guess it's a pretty straightforward plan we have. For the past 4 to 5 years, we've been developing and building rocket engines at Technical University of Munich. We took our really...
Wait. Why are you building rockets at the Technical University of Munich?
That was within a student group where we just liked rockets. And we said, in our free time, yes, we drank a lot of beer, but also we built rockets. Because just we're
so
kind of
and beer.
Space nerds, exactly. Okay. So we decided to build rockets in our free time as students. And then we got the first request from companies wanting to buy our rocket engines, where we said, oh, wait, why do they want to buy our rocket engines we built at the student group? So we took a look at the market and saw exactly what also Bulent said before. There are so many satellite companies now building satellites, and especially satellite constellations, that we really had the plan now to build a rocket.
Yeah, very cool. And you know, there's a reason why there is a student group, right? You know, it's the VAR. Who here knows the VAR? Yeah, well, okay, you know, of course you know it. You know, so the VAR is the Wissenschaftliche Arbeitsgruppe für Raketentechnik und Raumfahrt, so the working group for rocketry. And it was started in the 1960s, you know, by Professor Schmucker. And actually, my uncle started the same thing in Stuttgart, and they kind of combined forces. And it has been in existence ever since. And the reason why it was started was because you couldn't start rocketry back then. And so the students had to self-organize. And, you know, this was, of course, you know, during the space race, you know, and all the impressions from the moon landing, which actually was exactly 50 years ago. You know, it's hard to imagine, right?
Also, coming back to your question, what's your plan for really getting to orbit? And I said before, it's a kind of a really straightforward plan. We have a very great team with hands-on experience.
A lot of them from the VAR, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So the core team of our company comes out of the student group. Then we have customers who really trust us very early on, that we can build a rocket and who are willing to launch with us. So that also takes away the risk from the market side for us. And the third thing we need is capital, of course. Building rockets is not something you do every day. So of course you need capital. And on that idea as well, the ones who missed the SpaceX investments, we're currently raising our Series A round within the next weeks. I'd be happy if you reach out to us.
These guys are great. You know, I've been mentoring them for a long time. You know, good friends, and they are amazing. So if you have money, invest in them. Speaking of money, Bulent, I mean, you are the first investor in these guys, yeah. Right? You know, but as you said, you have a history of space exploration already, and you know, this is actually something that we see a lot in the Silicon Valley. So people always wonder, why is the Silicon Valley, still the hotspot for innovation in the world? And the reason is because there are so many investors that were entrepreneurs before. And what we're seeing here is you were one of the first guys who worked for SpaceX. You did the whole journey, and now you actually are in a position to actually see, these guys make sense, these guys maybe make not so much sense, and you can put your own money and the money from the LPs that you have from your growing fund into companies like yours. And we have, who are your other investors here in Munich?
It's both local investors, Unternehmertum, Venture Capital, and Vito Ventures.
Yeah, exactly. So Munich investors plus Bulent, and we have a winning team. So Bulent, I brought a small video for you as well. So what are we seeing here?
Well, this is the Falcon Heavy launch. If for people who may not know the SpaceX vehicles, we built a vehicle called the Falcon 9. The Falcon Heavy is essentially 3 of those put together. It's actually the most powerful rocket currently in service. And this is the first and ever launch of that rocket. And the 2 side boosters, which are the rockets on the side, are coming simultaneously back on Earth. Just to give a context, there is no other rocket that lands today. This is 2 landing simultaneously. And for people who do not know, those 2 videos on the side, they are not the same video. They are 2 different rockets working in synchronicity. And this was a fantastic day. So the thing I feel most about is pride, because the landing was within my department.
Yeah. So actually, my wife, where's my wife? My wife and I, we pulled our kids out of bed. They were already went to get bed. It wasn't clear, whether the rocket would launch that day. And we watched that. And we have 2 11-year-old girls. And for the next 2 months, they woke up to Spaceman from David Bowie, which they played during the launch. As they set their alarm clock to play this song. So speaking about inspiration, for young people and entrepreneurs and everybody, it's so important. So tell us a nice story about your Elon days. I mean, you have so many. I mean, what is it like to work for SpaceX?
First of all, you're working for a grand vision. I think it's not a secret. Everyone knows you're working probably on a short week. You're working 120 hours a week. Most others, you're working 180, although there's only 168 a week for the last 12 your wife kicks in. You're working a lot. But also on the other side, you're working not because of the money or anything. You're working because of the vision. And I got the vision right here on top of me. Occupy Mars. So we gotta go multi-planetary. Not that I'm against Earth. I think we should do everything to keep this Earth as habitable and as clean as possible. But we also cannot deny the fact that we gotta expand, we gotta get more, and I think Mars is a natural next step to be. And what really SpaceX is you come in through the doors every day and you get faced with an amazing technical challenge that no one ever had seen before. And you just try chipping away at it, just like you would eat an elephant, one small piece at a time.
I mean, you were sitting on an atoll in the U.S. Marshall Islands, screwing rockets together, sitting in a small blockhouse, and then launching them, and they would explode most of the time. And how does that feel? I mean, you were how old?
By then, I was probably 26. And maybe
my first job, huh?
Maybe I was about 30 when we finally made it into orbit. And maybe if you really want an interesting story, is the way we made it to that launch. I'll tell a really short and sweet version of it. As SpaceX, I don't know if everyone knows the story. We did 3 launches, and as Lin said, they ended up with RUDs, also called Rapid Unscheduled Disassemblies, or explosions. Rocket versus Earth, mostly Earth wins. And the 4th time was really, we were just running out of money. We didn't have any money left. And we were gonna make it, or we're gonna close doors. And we didn't, when you're a venture-backed company, time is everything. Time is the biggest money suck you have. So instead of shipping it to the launch site, which is in the middle of Pacific, we decided to send it via plane. First time we put the rockets into the plane, and we did a little bit, probably didn't think this through as much as we should have. We loaded this rocket onto the plane in the middle of the LAX, LA International Airport, really worrying people that the Third World War had broken out. Really, there was like a plane going by and everyone was looking out. But we started flying it. You have to land in the middle in Hawaii because you can't fly to the Marshall Islands in one go. And we're landing with this military airplane that the Air Force had lent us for this purpose. And just as we're landing, the rocket starts crumpling. I'm sure all of you know when you close your water bottle in a plane and you start landing, it starts crumpling. Same thing. Exact same thing, and it starts crumpling. I was sitting in the cockpit. I hear odd noises coming from the back. I go back and look at the rocket. I see it crumbling. My structural engineer is in tears. I go back to the cockpit and tell, we got to go back up. And the guy says, sure, boss, and goes right back up. I gotta love those Air Force guys, and says, I have 30 minutes of fuel. Either the rocket or we are gonna crash, so you better make it work. So we went back down, put a bunch of holes in the rocket, plopped it back up, flew to Marshall Islands. Everything inside the rocket was broken. It would have taken normally 3 months to build it again. We did it in 17 days, did a static fire, launched it, made orbit. SpaceX's history. Yeah. That was a great day.
I mean, everybody thinks, I mean, Elon is this billionaire, but he was literally running out of money. I mean, he was lending money to pay his rent, at that time. So, speaking about crazy visions, I mean, so Andy, tell us about, what you're working on. So you're an astrophysicist. You're a theoretical physicist. So you don't have to build rockets, but you can still dream big. And you created a really interesting project together with your colleagues called Origins.
Yeah. So what is Origins? So this is a new collaboration between biophysicists and astro and particle physics to explore the origin of our universe as we know it from the simple conditions at the Big Bang, and as a side product, the origin of life. We think origin or life is something that emerges naturally as a consequence of the evolution of the universe. We want to build the first life forms on Earth in a little lab, and we want to demonstrate, is there life in the universe, or are we alone in the universe? So that's
okay, so just saying, there's a lot of mind-blowing stuff in the relative sentences here. So you want to create artificial life in the lab?
Sure.
Okay.
We have 7 years to do it, which is enough time.
And you got this is something very important, and you got the funding to do it.
Sure.
So you got the funding through the excellence initiative of the German German
Science Foundation.
Yeah, Science Foundation, and you have 43 million now to do this over the next 10 years. So you will create life in the lab. You want to prove that life is inevitable. So it's not some random thing that happened just once. It's something that is intrinsic in the nature of the universe, that it always happens.
Perfect. You did it. I trained you well. Well done.
We've had some conversations before about this stuff.
Yeah.
So,
very good.
So what do you need for this? I mean, you definitely want to launch some satellites, right? And I think we have...
Exactly. So first thing we do is in the lab to generate molecular life forms that replicate. And these molecules transform the information they have to the next generation. That's the beginning of life. But we also would like to find life in the universe. And we know now of more than 3,000 planets, and most of them actually, many of them having conditions such that life could exist on them. And we have figured out how to analyze their atmospheres. So what we want to do is we want to generate small space cubes, send them out into the space, and then basically try to find and analyze the atmosphere and find the evidence for something out of equilibrium, which is a major condition for life to exist. If you find ozone, it's something that we only know to form if life is there. And then demonstrate on this planet is life. Maybe let's look at it in more details and maybe send someone there in the future.
Yeah, so you need to launch satellites, right?
Yes.
We have a rocket company
That's
here.
exactly what, yeah.
Okay, so we have an announcement, and it's one of these DLD things. You put a bunch of really crazy people together, excluding me, and magic happens. So we have an official announcement, right? It's going out to the DLD press, people, that the Origins project and Isar Aerospace will work together to launch a satellite that explores dark matter, and the stuff that you just talked about, which I don't understand. And we're doing this, and you're doing this in the context of Bavaria's space program. Bavaria actually has a space program called Bavaria 1. There was a lot of ridicule. Yeah, I know. So there's some people here from Bavaria. Now I have a request. When we do stuff like that, when we announce things like that, the tendency in Germany is to start laughing. We had the same thing with flying cars recently. And, this stuff is real. I mean, we've just seen, this is still, it's not up here, but, we just saw these rockets land. This stuff is real. And this announcement is real. So you're going to launch the satellites, you're going to build a launcher, and they are going to do it together. So big round of applause to a true DLD moment.
Yeah. And we try to do it in 7 years. CubeSats will be in orbit, hopefully, in this time, and we'll look for dark matter, which is the most important ingredient in the universe. We have no idea what it is, and we'll search for planets and life in the universe.
Yeah, that's so cool. So when you have satellites up there, these satellites need to communicate. And there's an increasing need for communications. And your company is doing something really important for that. So maybe tell us a little bit about your project and what you're working on here.
Right. So we heard it before from Steffi that many people believe that the space industry will be the biggest industry in 15 years or so from now. Why is that? Because space just happens to be an excellent place to solve many problems we have down on the ground here. And one problem we are working on is basically connectivity. Today we are all very comfortable with our smartphones, and we are all connected flying from LA to Munich, and it's all nice and fine as long as you're not on an airplane where it's still a bit patchy, the connectivity. But then connectivity like this is only available to 3 billion people on Earth, and the remaining 3 to 4 billion people are not connected like that. So there's huge untapped economic potential when you get these people connected. And many really large companies are striving out to build infrastructure, communication infrastructure, towers, you could say, that beam internet everywhere up in space. And
so what you're talking about are these huge satellite constellations, right?
Exactly.
That people like Branson and Elon Musk and a lot of other companies are trying to launch. So they are relatively small satellites, but lots of them. And like the GPS satellites, they are constantly going out of range, so they have to switch between them, and you're building the infrastructure for it, right?
Exactly. We basically built a fiber optic cable, but without the cable. Yeah. Because you have to interconnect these satellites with each other to establish a network up there in space. But since you can't connect these satellites with the cable, you need to do it wirelessly. And that's what we do. We use the same technology as used in fiber optic cables, but you don't use the cable. Beam lasers, basically a laser pointer, we point very accurately at satellites 4,000 kilometers apart. To establish connectivity.
And you guys are already doing this, right?
That's very real. I mean, we're building this stuff. We're actually working with Facebook. That's one of our clients. Yeah. And many of you have probably heard of the Aquila program. Yeah. This is the kind of stuff we are doing.
So, one of the interesting things is, there's a lot of stuff happening here in Germany, as we've seen, but there's a lot of stuff happening elsewhere. So you gave me, honestly, a shocking number. So there's a number of companies that launch satellite constellations. So how many of these are European that you know of?
Maybe 1 or 2.
Okay, so you know of one, yeah. So how many of these are Chinese?
Maybe 10, 15?
And how many are US-based?
About the same number, I'd say.
Okay, so can anybody see a problem here? Right? So we're talking about the next generation of connectivity. And it's probably not just going to be Africa. I mean, frankly, we have a huge connectivity problem even in Germany in rural areas and sometimes even in non-rural areas. If you've been in the United States to a remote area, there's usually no internet connectivity. So we're talking about the next generation of connectivity, and Europe is missing out. So this is really why we need to get bolder about these space technologies. It's critical. It makes financial sense, but it's also a strategic problem if we don't do a communications infrastructure. So,
I mean, it's the same situation as we had about 20 years ago with the internet.
Yeah.
So if you started an internet company 20 years ago, everyone was going crazy. What are you doing? Now, if you tell you're building an internet company, it's okay. Yeah, he's building an internet company, and we're really trying also to get people to get more comfortable with space in general. That you can really rely on space data. That actually space is already today in our everyday lives. And that we really push this industry, not just in the US and in China, but also in Europe.
So who here has used Google Maps recently? Okay. I mean, you're connecting to 5 to 12 satellites instantaneously to get like a pinpoint location. And we don't think about this, right? So clearly, space is extremely relevant. But there's a lot of stuff out there in space. So can we have the next picture? Andy, what is this here?
Well, this is one of the most exciting objects I've ever seen. It's an interstellar comet. A comet not from our solar system, but from another solar system.
So when you say it's not from our solar system, most comets, almost all comets...
Almost all of them are within our solar system.
They just fly around the sun?
Yeah, these are leftovers from the early parts. They maybe brought the water to Earth. But this is an object that has so large a velocity that's not bound to the solar system. So it was just going through it, traveling through it on a very short time, and disappearing again into outer space. And it is so we know there are other solar systems like ours which generate comets and water and everything. And we can actually work out the likelihood to find it right now with 30 years of being able to find something like that. It tells us that there are 10 to the 26. As I said, gigantic number simply, Google type number of these comets in our Milky Way. That means every solar system must have generated 10 to the 15 comets.
So I have to ask you about the other thing that's strange about this comet.
Yeah.
So,
okay, I know, yes, okay.
So this comet, I mean, a comet is something that usually flies in a pretty predictable way, right? And this one didn't, right?
No, we have a problem with this thing. It's first of all, it has a shape which is not what we are used to in the solar system, but it's simply because the universe is so much more fascinating than we can ever imagine. So that is not a problem. But it's a very thin sheet, almost like a monolith. And it is not working according to Kepler's law. It is actually...
So Kepler's law is like, stuff works in a predictive way.
The solar system works according to what our Kepler said, but this thing is not from the solar system, so it doesn't work like Kepler said. So it works differently, and now the idea has come up that maybe it's a spaceship. It's something which...
So it did something that it shouldn't have done. It accelerated at some point.
Yes, it's accelerated. Yeah. Maybe it didn't like what it saw, and so now it's going somewhere else, find out whether there are better places to go. And
so you said if aliens visited us, it would be very embarrassing right now.
It would be indeed. I think right now it's good that nobody visits us.
Okay, maybe we have a couple of years.
Can kind of fix it here on Earth, and then we are kind of happy to invite.
So these comments are also sometimes a little bit dangerous, right? And sometimes they hit the Earth.
This is we did an estimate. We expect every million year to be hit by such a comet.
So last time was when?
Well, a million years should have been a million years ago. It didn't happen, so it can happen anytime.
Okay.
The bad thing about this thing, it's much faster than any other asteroid we have in the solar system, and we can never ever predict it, because it just happens to arrive and then it's there, and you can't search for these comets in outer space. It's too dark.
Yeah.
So we just have to live with this kind of danger. And but I think it's not good enough. We need to protect our Earth.
And you're working with a common friend on a foundation,
yes,
Fragile World Foundation.
Well, try to build a shield to protect us.
Yeah. Maybe using lasers. So you're sitting next to. Maybe we have another announcement here somewhere. Okay, so you're doing Star Wars version 2, fighting against the asteroids. Yeah, but it's a real problem. I mean, if something came, I mean, this thing came out of nowhere, right?
Exactly.
And if something like that happens, I mean, you were likening it to. I mean, we prepare against earthquakes. We have plans in place when an earthquake happens. But we have no plans in place when an asteroid strikes. And it can actually strike in any hour, right?
Yes, sure.
So it's slightly scary.
400 meters.
But it's not good if it hits us.
It's already big enough to do a major damage.
Yeah, very, very cool. So, let's briefly talk about this picture and what it is.
Yeah, well, this is these are extrasolar planetary systems. Each of these objects is an observed planetary system. Of course, it's an animation. They don't look like that, but you see the variety of planets in the universe. And there are more planets in the Milky Way than there are sand cones on our Earth. And just if you look at this kind of variety and complexity and that many, it makes no sense that only on one planet here on Earth life should have formed. What a waste, so to say. And so I think planets are all over, and we will be very soon actually be able to find planets where maybe life is
so
located.
We should definitely do something with space. It makes commercial sense. There's definitely a lot of fascination. I've never seen so many bright eyes, in a panel audience, than here. What do we need in order for this to accelerate, especially in Europe? I mean, Bulent, maybe you can briefly talk about what happened in the United States.
Sure. I think for it to accelerate, we need the space economy. The one that is building right now in the US, in China, and a couple of other places, we need that to be worldwide. I think we need Europe to adopt that same philosophy of new space as well.
Yeah.
This whole philosophy got adopted in the US and I think there are parts of Europe that really are adopting it too, just not to that same extent and the same capital. But what really happened in the US was a couple of billionaires definitely had the vision, hey, you know what, we can push technology a couple of steps further, and they started the companies we know of. Blue Origin is one actually older than SpaceX, 99, then SpaceX, Virgin, and many others came on board.
So you have the billionaires, but what
exactly.
what kind of ecosystem do you need? But because the billionaires themselves couldn't have done it.
Yeah. So, but as you said, that wasn't all of it. The universities played a big role. CubeSat got the whole idea of a CubeSat got
So a really
invented.
small satellite, it uses miniaturized components.
10 centimeter by 10 centimeter by 10 centimeters, weighing 1 kilogram. I actually worked at that time at that lab when we were coming up with that. And then the biggest ingredient then also was governmental support. Sure, we were trying to do it with the billionaires' money and whatnot, but at first, it has to become reality. You need that core customer. And that's exactly what NASA did.
And NASA used to build everything themselves. And it took decades and cost lots of money, maybe with the exception of the Kennedy phase, right? And what changed, or what did NASA do?
I think NASA changed in its thinking that there are certain parts of space exploration better be done by commercial entities now, and they can concentrate on deep space exploration. They said low Earth orbit, what is really serving Earth, and that's really a big part of the space business today, should be now commercialized. The technology is there, it's just about doing it and doing it efficiently. So they said the International Space Station, always been visited by governmental vehicles like the Space Shuttle, should now be serviced by commercial entities. And they started this program called COTS, Commercial Orbital Transportation Services. And they said, instead of sending shuttle to the space station, we're going to give the job to a couple of entities. They have to abide by a new set of rules. It's going to be fixed firm price. There is only this much money, and that's all you're going to get. You make it there with less money, you made profit. You make it with more money, you made loss. We're not going to subsidize that more than that. And they offered an amount of money that was unheard of. For NASA, it was peanuts. Well, I'm going to tell the number. It's going to sound high, but it was an award of about $400 million initially for 3 launches, where you got to realize, keeping a space shuttle not flying, just on the ground, is $1.5 billion. Every single time you launch it, add another $1 billion to that. So, and then they wrote another $1.2 billion check for 12 launches. So think about the cost comparison there. Yeah. But that's exactly it. They took a risk, a well-calculated, small risk for a huge award. They almost thought like we would right now as a VC. They looked at the upside and they supported their entrepreneurial space group to say, we're going to go do this business that was normally done by governments. They supported it, but it wasn't just a grant. It was a milestone-based award that said, if you make it, here's the money. And I think that was one of the best initiatives.
So we have Bavaria 1, we have nothing on the national level. We don't really have anything on the European level. So you would say that, the request to politics would be just copy what NASA did, 15, 20 years ago, basically.
I think an adaptation of COTS would be a fantastic thing for Europe, for Germany, for Bavaria. A standing contract with some of the commercial suppliers, especially the emerging ones, that show that the government believes in them, the government believes in the commercial viability of them, that there is going to be a core customer there that supports them along the way, but just don't give grants, give people who actually perform, make it milestone-based. Don't just press the money on the hand.
And it also then invigorates the VC ecosystem, because if the VCs understand, oh, wow, there is a market, because it's basically guaranteed if they fulfill their milestones, there is a market, I'm going to invest in them because I know, I'm not going to be stranded without a business.
And actually, I think maybe if I can add something, what we also need is the courage and optimism actually to reflect on the motto here, both in politics, but also from the entrepreneurs and from the investment side, that these things are happening, these things are real, and they will be real, and we will face a big economy in the future in space, really. Because when we reached out to investors a couple of years back, they're all saying, you guys are crazy. This is never going to work. I mean, what are you doing? Space lasers? Really? This is what you're proposing? I'm like, yeah, that's what you're proposing. We're serious.
Let's show the space lasers quickly here.
So yeah, these are space lasers. These are the pictures we're showing investors. And you can imagine some of these guys usually investing in, I don't know, different stuff, let's say. They fall from their chair and don't believe that this is real and this can be a business. And now, a couple of years later, we're on the stock market, actually. So things are moving here.
Yeah. Maybe actually, to add to that, that's exactly it. People need to realize that this isn't just science fiction or space exploration. Yeah. This is business. Really, once again, going back to SpaceX as an example, that's a company that's about 15 years old, but employs 7,000 people. And it's the 3rd largest company, private company in the world with $30 billion of valuation. That is generation of jobs locally, right there.
Yeah, and I mean, just talking about business, really. I mean, Ariane used to be the biggest commercial launcher. They had like 80% market share. How much is it now?
It has really dwindled. I think currently the SpaceX market share I can comment on is close to the 70% that Ariane used to have now. And this is just in short time.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is actually really, really critical that we do this. I mean, Daniel, I mean, thoughts, I mean, what do you need? I mean, you got, fortunately, a little bit of encouragement. You got actually local investors together with Bulent. But, what else do you need?
First off, we're working on it to get the market share back to Europe.
Yeah.
So, especially with all of the small satellites really being built in the future, we try to bring really flexible and affordable launch services to Europe and generally to the international space launch market. On the other hand, as Bulent said, the Commercial Orbital Transportation Services program by NASA is something that especially the Europeans also could benefit very much from, just with some local or national or European, for example, governmental funding that just kind of gives the initial kickoff for the industry to take shape, and that's exactly what the SpaceX did. they didn't just build a great company, but they built an entire market around themselves.
But very concretely, I mean, would it help if, for example, the state of Bavaria, in the context of Bavaria 1, guaranteed one launch per year to the best launch company that is in Bavaria or whatever, moves to Bavaria, and then gives, the launch capability to the payload that makes the most sense, like Andy or whoever, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, Bulent, this is something that you told me and we discussed, and wouldn't that be a first start?
I think a concept like that would work very well, because it's not just about supporting the launch vehicle provider, which in itself ought to be a competed service, sure, but it also draws everyone towards Bavaria as a space center. And
so all the innovative space companies would move to Bavaria because they know that there is a market there and there's a commitment to space.
Yeah, look, when you're starting a satellite company, the launch is still a big part of your capex of starting the company. And if there was a chance that you could get that given to you by a governmental or by a commercial competition that gives you, for example, an Isar rocket once a year, I think a lot of people would consider being here. And there's already other countries around the world that are trying to generate these kind of draws.
Yeah.
Let's take, for example, also Luxembourg, which is per se a very small company with limited resources in industry. Still, they achieve to attract all of the small satellite companies just by giving a regulatory framework.
I mean, they did something crazy, right? In the 60s or 70s, they put laws in place that governed the legal framework for communication satellites. Everybody thought they were nuts. And yeah, well, now all the companies are back there, right? So yeah, we could talk forever. It's a super interesting topic. You can imagine I'm super interested in it. I think I mean, a call to action for all of us here. I mean, I think, I said it before, people always smile a little bit strangely when you come up with, these science fiction ideas that are actually science facts. There's a famous quote from the guy who put the first man on the moon with his rocket, Werner von Braun. He was a German, obviously. And he said something really nice. He said, I've learned to use the word impossible with the greatest caution. And I think this is maybe something that we could all kind of internalize a little bit more, as we talk about these things. Thank you so much for this really great panel. It's a big honor. Thanks, Bulent, for flying in, and thank you for listening.